It is about resilience through health, as we learned very, very clearly in the COVID pandemic. It is about social cohesion and territorial cohesion. It is about social infrastructure. That's a European brand. That's a European way of life. So we need to act in all these areas in order to ensure peace, security, stability on our continent, but also in our neighborhoods. And that's what the European Investment Bank has in its DNA, and that's where we're good at.
Welcome to the interview from the BBC World Service with Nadia Calvino. How important is a strong Europe when you look at the current geopolitical landscape?
Well, we see that the geopolitical context, the global order, is reshaping. Some say it is actually crumbling down. I think there is a new global order that will emerge, but we are in the midst of this transformation, and we're entering a new phase, as we see. And in this context, it's more important than ever that Europe acts as a beacon of democracy, of human rights, respect, win-win partnerships where everybody wins. In order for you to have a success, you don't need others to lose, which seems to be the approach of some others, in these troubling times. An approach that fosters peace and mutual respect. I think that this is really important, and Europe has learned lessons throughout our history, unfortunately, that can be very valuable for the world as we are building this new world order.
You identified four key urgent action plans. That includes having a deeper European integration, large-scale investment, especially in critical infrastructure, simplification of the EU, making it more nimble, more agile, and of course more partnerships and global alliances. Can you break that down a little bit?
But it is clear that, sometimes we focus very much on what is happening on the other side of the Atlantic, whether there is a tariff that is being imposed or that there are new technologies and supply chains around the world are changing. But actually, Europe is a superpower. The European Union represents 150 million persons. Of course, much more when we talk about the UK, Switzerland, Norway. And if we think about those sectors that are key for the future, Europe is a superpower, a technology superpower, whether it's quantum technologies, aerospace, health tech. Many people may think, oh, this is very far from me, but more and more I think that we're all aware that these technologies are going to be key in our daily lives. So if we build on our strengths and we have a larger, real, integrated one market in Europe, then that is going to create the right scale for companies to be able to thrive and scale up. And likewise, when it comes to simplification, reducing bottlenecks, reducing friction and fragmentation, and large-scale investments. And that's where the European Investment Bank comes in, of course. It's a great success story of the European Union with capital injection by the member states, now 27, originally 28, have been able to mobilize trillions of investment that finance the super infrastructures that we have, from highways to airports, also research centers, universities, and hospitals, and frameworks that can build networks and partnerships around the world.
What are your key priority areas for investment right now? I mean, there's a lot that the EIB is doing across the region, but also in places like Africa and Latin America. But in terms of your priorities, what would you say is the niggling one right now? I mean, there's a lot that the EIB is doing across the region, but also in places like Africa and Latin America. But in terms of your priorities, what would you say is the niggling one right now?
Well, 90% of our finances, you rightly say, finances projects inside the EU, 10% around the world. But our priorities are similar in all areas, and our shareholders have unanimously supported them last in 2024. So we're keeping the course in being the climate bank, making the green transition, the clean transition, a European success that leads to lower energy prices, cleaner, more sustainable energy. And as we're seeing these days in the Middle East with the escalation of the conflict, we need to accelerate our energy autonomy in Europe. That's very clear. Second priority, technological leadership, supporting high-risk, innovative technologies, whether it is in clean tech or space, as I mentioned, that ensures that Europe continues to be a technology powerhouse. And third priority, security and defense, because it is very clear we need to step up our support and our strength in the area of security and defense. We're also very active in agriculture and bioeconomy. Of course, we support territorial cohesion, but probably these three areas are our top priorities right now.
I noticed that with your funding for defense, it's quadrupled in the last year, and you've broken it down into five key areas: investing in infrastructure, homegrown capacity, i.e. drones, etc., research, SMEs within the supply chain, and of course new venture capital within the EU, focused on security and defense. Could you elaborate on the decisions behind quadrupling the budget, but also how you intend to go down the ecosystem?
Is when I took the helm of the European Investment Bank in January 2024, the war in Ukraine had been going on for almost 2 years, and it was clear to me that we needed to step up our support in this area, which was virtually non-existent at that time. And it is impressive how in a matter of couple of years we've been able to build a very robust pipeline. We've been able to finance last year around 4 billion euros, reaching 5% of our finance inside the EU. And these five areas are determined by the pipeline of projects we have. And those areas where the European Investment Bank is uniquely placed. There is no other institution in Europe, public or private, that operates in all the 27 member states, in all the regions, and can provide really large-scale, long-term finance. Loans that may run up to 30 years in good financial conditions, so as to finance military mobility infrastructures, military campuses, but also high-risk research programs, scale up also venture capital investments, acting as an anchor investor that brings in private capital to support the ecosystem of startups and scale-ups in Europe. And what I see is great potential. I have myself visited a number of companies that show that this technological leadership is there, and what we need is to reach scale and speed.
Are you or is the EIB under some pressure to be the financier of defense within Europe?
We're the European Investment Bank, so we put the money where Europe's priorities are. Right now, this means climate, technology, security and defense, and social infrastructures and the rest. So I think that these, all of it is very much underpinning competitiveness and security. Many people may think, oh, well, defense is about tanks. No, defense is also about energy security, isn't it?
Absolutely.
It is about resilience to health, as we learned very, very clearly with the COVID pandemic. It is about social cohesion and territorial cohesion. It is about social infrastructures. That's the European brand. That's the European way of life. So we need to act in all these areas in order to ensure peace, security, stability, on our continent, but also in our neighborhood. And that's what the European Investment Bank has in its DNA, and that's where we're good at.
Some reports have shown that over 60% of EU companies complain about the fragmentation within the market when it comes to exporting.
Some estimates from the International Monetary Fund consider that the fragmentation existing in our internal market is actually comparable to a 45% tariff when it comes to goods, and even 110% tariff when it comes to services. Now, I see this as a huge opportunity.
I'm wondering, these strengths that Europe has is almost like a reminder to the rest of the world that Europe has always been a superpower, but with what's happening now in the geopolitical system, it was an opportunity for Europe to remind the world that we're here and we are the stable partner that you can rely on regardless of what's happening around the world.
Yeah, absolutely. You nailed it. Because many times we see doom and gloom around us, and as we see war and death and flood around us and conflict, it is sometimes overwhelming. And citizens feel insecure and they wonder. And obviously, the European Union is a project of peace. So we cannot be a defense and a military superpower when we have been building a project of peace on the ashes of the wars that have permeated the European history. So sometimes we need to remind ourselves. And I think the investment report, although it may be very far away, is a very good illustration, because we built this report on the basis of the analysis of 13,000 companies in the EU and in the US.